The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. For 12,000 years, this chamber had witnessed the rise and fall of empires. It had seen treaties signed and wars declared. But today, something different filled the air. Today, there was shame. Admiral of the Dominion stood at the center of the chamber. He was a massive creature, standing nearly 8 feet tall with thick skin and 4 eyes that usually glowed with fierce pride. But now those eyes stared at the floor. He could not bring himself to look at the representatives of the 37 species who filled the seats around him. The humans had won the war. It was the year 2847 by Earth's calendar. Just 6 months ago, the Galactic Council had voted to attack humanity. The decision had been unanimous. Every species had agreed that Earth needed to be conquered. The humans were growing too fast, spreading too quickly across the stars. They needed to be stopped before they became a real threat. The Council had expected an easy victory. Humanity had only been traveling among the stars for 300 years. They were bobbies compared to the ancient civilizations of the Council. Their fleet numbered only a few hundred ships, while the Council commanded millions of warships across the galaxy. But the Council had made a terrible mistake. They had not understood what humans truly were. Commander Lisa Monroe had led the final battle against the Council fleet. She was a woman of average height with short brown hair and eyes that had seen too much death. She had joined the military at 18 and had spent her entire adult life preparing for a war that everyone hoped would never come. When it came, she was ready. The Council fleet had surrounded Earth with 10,000 warships. They had expected humanity to surrender. Instead, Lisa Monroe had led a desperate attack that no sane military commander would ever attempt. She had taken her cruiser, the Defiant Hope, straight into the heart of the enemy formation. Her crew had thought she was crazy. Her officers had questioned her orders. But Lisa had seen something that others missed. The Council ships were too confident. They had spread out, leaving gaps in their formation that a smaller, faster ship could exploit. The Defiant Hope had weaved through the enemy fleet like a dancer. It had used the debris from destroyed ships as cover, hiding behind wreckage, and then striking from unexpected angles. When Council commanders tried to target them, Lisa had already moved to a new position. The battle lasted for 18 hours. By the end, the Defiant Hope was barely holding together. Half the crew was dead. The engines were failing. Life support was running on backup power. But they had reached Admiral's flagship. Lisa had led the boarding party herself. She had walked through the corridors of the massive alien vessel with a plasma rifle in her hands and fire in her heart. The guards had tried to stop her. They had failed. She had found Admiral on his command bridge, surrounded by his officers. He had looked at her with all 4 of his eyes, expecting to see fear in this small human female. Instead, he had seen something that chilled his blood. He had seen determination. "You will surrender," Lisa had told him. Her voice was calm, almost peaceful. "You will order your fleet to stand down, and you will sign whatever treaty we put in front of you." Had laughed. Even with enemies on his bridge, he could not believe that a human was giving him orders. "And if I refuse?" Lisa had smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "Then I will kill everyone on this ship, starting with you, and find someone else to sign the treaty." She had meant it, could see that clearly. This human woman would burn the entire galaxy down before she surrendered, and suddenly he had understood why the Council had lost. Humans did not give up. They did not accept defeat. They would fight until their last breath, and then they would find a way to keep fighting even after that. The Treaty of Mars had been signed 3 days later. The Council had given 17 star systems to human control. They had agreed to pay reparations that would cripple their economy for generations, and they had promised to never attack humanity again. But promises made in defeat were often broken. Now, 6 months after the war, the Council met in secret on a hidden world called Prime. This planet was not on any official maps. Only the highest members of the council knew it existed. It was a place where dark decisions were made, far from the eyes of ordinary citizens. High Counselor called the meeting to order. He was an ancient reptilian creature from the Empire, one of the oldest civilizations in the galaxy. His scales were dark green, almost black, and his eyes held the cold wisdom of centuries. "We have gathered here to discuss the human problem," he said. His voice echoed through the dark chamber. "Our military has failed. Our fleets have been humiliated. We cannot defeat humanity in open warfare." The representatives shifted uncomfortably. No one wanted to admit that smaller, younger species had beaten them so badly. Ambassador of the rose to speak. Her species was known throughout the galaxy for their telepathic abilities and their cunning minds. She was tall and thin, with skin that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. "If we cannot defeat them in battle," she said, "then we must defeat them in other ways. We must hunt them in the shadows. We must kill their leaders, their heroes, their minds. We must break their spirit piece by piece." The chamber fell silent. What proposed was assassination. It was murder. It was against every law and treaty the Council had ever signed. But desperation made beings do terrible things. Counselor of the Mechanical Collective spoke next. His voice came from a small box mounted on his chest, translating his electronic thoughts into words. "You propose a shadow war, a campaign of terror against the humans." "I propose survival," replied. "The humans are dangerous. They adapt faster than any species we have ever encountered. They feel no fear. If we allow them to grow stronger, they will eventually destroy us all." High Counselor listened to the debate that followed. Some argued that the plan was too risky. Others said it did not go far enough. But in the end, the vote was held. 29 species voted in favor of the Shadow Campaign. 8 abstained, too afraid to support it but also too afraid to oppose it. None voted against. The hunt for humanity had begun. In the weeks that followed, assassins were dispatched across the galaxy. They were the best killers that money and power could buy, shapeshifters who could wear any face, telepaths who could kill with a thought, warriors who had never failed a mission. Their targets were the heroes of the human war, the commanders who had led the fight, the scientists who had developed new weapons, the politicians who had inspired their people to resist. One by one they would all fall, or so the Council believed. They had not yet learned the most important lesson about humanity. Killing a human only made the others angry, and an angry human was the most dangerous thing in the universe. Lisa Monroe had always dreamed of a simple life. After 20 years of military service and a war that had nearly destroyed humanity, she wanted nothing more than peace. She bought a small farm on the colony world of New Virginia and tried to forget about the battles she had fought. The farm was beautiful. Rolling hills covered with golden wheat stretched as far as the eye could see. The sky was a perfect blue, with 2 small moons that rose together every evening. Lisa spent her days working the land and her nights sitting on her porch, watching the stars. For 3 months she was happy. Her nearest neighbor was an old man named Pete. He had lived on New Virginia for 40 years and knew everything about farming. Every Sunday, he would walk over to Lisa's farm with a fresh apple pie and stories about the old days. Lisa looked forward to those visits. Pete reminded her of her grandfather who had died when she was young. He was kind and gentle, with a warm smile and eyes that crinkled when he laughed. On a Tuesday afternoon, Pete came to visit. This was unusual because he always came on Sundays. Lisa was working in her barn when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and saw Pete standing in the doorway, but something was wrong. Pete always knocked before entering. He always called out a greeting. This Pete just stood there, watching her with empty eyes. "Pete," Lisa said carefully. Her hand moved slowly toward the plasma pistol hidden under her workbench. Old habits died hard. The thing wearing Pete's face smiled. The expression was wrong, too wide, too hungry, like a mask that did not quite fit. Lisa had her pistol drawn and firing before the creature could attack. The plasma bolt hit it square in the chest, burning through flesh that was not really flesh. As it died, its true form was revealed. It was a shapeshifter species that could wear any face. The creature collapsed into dust, leaving nothing behind but the faint smell of burnt meat. Lisa stood over the remains for a long time. Her hands were shaking, though she did not realize it. The piece she had found was gone now, burned away like morning mist. She activated the communication implant in her head and called the one person she knew she could trust. "Danny," she said when Daniel Cooper answered, "they're coming for us." Daniel had served as Lisa's second in command during the war. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and a face that always looked tired. After the war, he had taken a job as a security consultant on Earth, helping to prepare humanity's defenses against future threats. When he received Lisa's call, he was in the middle of a meeting with 3 senators. He excused himself immediately and found a private room. "How many?" he asked. "One so far, shapeshifter, professional work." Daniel closed his eyes. He had warned the government that the council would seek revenge. He had written reports, given presentations, practically begged for better security for war heroes. No one had listened. They all thought the war was over. "I'm coming to you," he said. "Don't trust anyone until I get there. Not your neighbors, not the local police. No one." Lisa looked out the window of her barn at the peaceful fields that surrounded her home. Somewhere out there, the real Pete was probably dead, killed so that an alien monster could wear his face. "Hurry, Danny," she said quietly. Over the next 2 weeks, the killings began in earnest. Captain Sam Henderson, who had led the assault on a council supply depot, was poisoned at a restaurant on Earth. The toxin was something human doctors had never seen before. He died in minutes, his body convulsing as his organs shut down one by one. Lieutenant Maria Santos, a pilot who had destroyed 12 enemy warships during the final battle, was killed when her transport shuttle exploded. The investigation found evidence of sabotage, but the saboteur was never caught. Dr. Park, the scientist who had developed the shield technology that had saved countless human lives, was found dead in his laboratory. His throat had been cut with surgical precision. There were no witnesses and no evidence. 11 more deaths followed. Soldiers, scientists, engineers, and commanders. All of them had played important roles in winning the war. All of them were murdered in ways that left no trace of the killers. The media called it the Shadow Purge. Fear spread across human space like a disease. People who had celebrated victory just months ago now looked over their shoulders constantly. War heroes went into hiding. Scientists refused to work alone. The joy of winning had turned to ash in everyone's mouth. President addressed humanity from the steps of the United Earth Parliament building. She was a small woman with hair and a spine of steel. She had led humanity through the darkest days of the war, and she would lead them through this new darkness as well. "The Galactic Council believes they can defeat us through terror," she said, her voice broadcast to every human settlement in the galaxy. "They believe that by killing our heroes they will make us afraid. They will make us weak. They will make us surrender." She paused, letting her words sink in. "They are wrong." Behind her stood a group of war veterans, including Lisa Monroe and Daniel Cooper. They had come out of hiding to stand with their president, to show humanity that fear would not win. "We did not defeat the greatest military force in the galaxy by being afraid," President continued. "We won because we refused to give up, because we stood together, because we fought for each other." Her voice grew harder, colder. "To those who hunt our people in the shadows, hear me now. We will find you. We will stop you. And we will make you regret ever thinking that humanity could be broken." The speech was met with cheers across human space, but Lisa Monroe did not cheer. She stood quietly, watching the crowd, thinking about the battles to come. The council had made a terrible mistake. They thought that killing humans would destroy their spirit. Instead, it had only awakened something dangerous, something that had been sleeping since the war ended. Humanity's rage was awake now, and it would not rest until justice was done. Daniel Cooper stepped up beside her. "What are you thinking?" he asked quietly. Lisa looked at him with eyes that had gone cold and hard. "I'm thinking that we've been playing defense for too long. It's time to start hunting the hunters." Daniel nodded slowly. He had known Lisa for 20 years. He had seen that look in her eyes before, right before she led the assault on Admiral's flagship. The Shadow Purge had just gotten a lot more complicated. The hunters did not know it yet, but they had become the prey. And there was nothing in the galaxy more dangerous than a human with a grudge. 6 months had passed since the Shadow Purge began. 217 humans had been killed by Council assassins. Scientists, soldiers, politicians, and ordinary people who had helped humanity win the war. Each death was a wound that cut deep into the heart of human civilization. But humanity was not just dying, it was learning. On Titan, the largest moon of Saturn, there was an old mining facility that had been abandoned for 50 years. The tunnels ran deep into the frozen rock, far from any satellite or sensor that might detect activity. This was where the survivors gathered. They called it the refuge. Lisa Monroe stood at the center of the main operations room, surrounded by holographic displays that filled the air with blue light. Maps showed the movement of council ships. Charts tracked the patterns of assassinations. Lists contained the names of known alien agents operating in human space. Around her sat 24 men and women who had survived the Shadow Purge. Some were soldiers, some were scientists, some were simply people who refused to die quietly. "We have identified 17 different species participating in the attacks," Lisa said, her voice calm and clear. "Each has their own methods, each has their own strengths, but they also have weaknesses." She pointed to a display showing a shapeless creature. "They are shapeshifters. They can copy any face, any voice, any mannerism, but they cannot hold a false shape for more than 6 hours. After that, they must return to their true form." The display changed to show a massive skinned warrior. "They are hunters. They are strong and fast and nearly impossible to kill with conventional weapons, but their hearing is extremely sensitive. Certain sound frequencies cause them intense pain." Another image appeared, showing a tall, thin creature with glowing eyes. "They are telepaths. They can read thoughts and even control weak minds, but they cannot read emotions that are too strong or too chaotic. Overwhelming grief or rage makes a person invisible to them." Brooks, a former Marine who had lost his entire squad to a hunting party, leaned forward. "So we can use these weaknesses against them." "Exactly," Lisa replied. "For 6 months we have been running and hiding. We have been waiting for the next attack, hoping we survive. That ends today." She looked around the room at the faces of people who had lost everything. Friends, family, homes, hope. She saw pain in their eyes, but she also saw something else, something hard and bright and dangerous. She saw the will to fight. "We are going to take the war to the Council," Lisa continued. "We are going to hunt the hunters. We are going to show them what happens when you make humanity angry." The plan she outlined was bold and risky. Teams would be formed to track and eliminate Council assassins operating in human space. Each team would be equipped with weapons designed to exploit specific alien weaknesses. They would strike fast, strike hard, and disappear before anyone knew what had happened. The first mission was led by Daniel Cooper. His target was a hunting party that had been stalking a human diplomat on the colony world of Prosperity. Daniel's team landed on Prosperity in a small shuttle disguised as a cargo vessel. They tracked to an abandoned warehouse on the edge of the capital city. 5 massive warriors were inside, preparing their weapons for the kill. Daniel's team did not give them the chance. They attacked at midnight, using sonic grenades that produced frequencies specifically designed to cripple hearing. The alien warriors screamed in agony as the sound tore through their sensitive ears. They stumbled and fell, unable to think, unable to fight. Daniel's team finished them quickly, 5 dead in less than 3 minutes. They left one survivor, deliberately, a young who had been standing furthest from the grenades and had survived with only minor injuries. He would carry a message back to the council. Daniel carved words into the wall above the terrified alien. "We remember. We adapt. We are coming." The second mission targeted an agent who had been coordinating assassinations from a luxury hotel on a neutral space station called Crossroads. The agent thought she was safe there, protected by diplomatic immunity and surrounded by guards. She was wrong. Amy volunteered for the mission. She was 23 years old with red hair and freckles and a smile that could light up a room. She looked harmless, innocent, like someone's little sister or the girl next door. But Amy's father had been killed by 2 months ago. They had invaded his mind and made him walk off the roof of his office building. Amy had watched him fall. She had held his broken body in her arms. Her grief was vast and bottomless. Her rage burned like a star, and those emotions made her invisible to telepathy. Amy walked into the hotel on Crossroads wearing a simple dress and carrying a small purse. She passed 3 guards without triggering any alarms. They tried to read her thoughts and found only a storm of emotion that they could not penetrate. She found the coordinator in a penthouse suite on the top floor. The never even sensed her coming. The last thing she saw was a young human woman with tears streaming down her face and a knife in her hand. Amy left her own message, written in the coordinator's blood, "Your turn." Word of the human counterattack spread quickly through council networks. For the first time since the Shadow Purge began, the hunters felt fear. High Counselor received the reports in his private chambers on Prime. His scales had turned almost white, a sign of deep distress among his species. He paced back and forth, his claws clicking against the stone floor. "They are adapting too quickly," he said to Ambassador, who stood watching him with her glowing eyes. "We have studied humans for centuries. We know their biology, their psychology, their history, yet they unravel our methods in mere months." Remained calm. Her telepathic mind touched the edges of thoughts and found only fear and confusion. This pleased her. Fear made beings easier to manipulate. "Perhaps we should change our approach," she suggested carefully. Spun to face her, his eyes blazing with desperate anger. "Change our approach? We have committed everything to this campaign. We have awakened sleeping agents across the galaxy. We have called in debts that were owed for. We have united species that have been enemies since before humans existed. We cannot simply stop now." "I am not suggesting we stop," replied smoothly. "I am suggesting we escalate. We have been hunting individuals. Perhaps it is time to think bigger." The High Counselor stared at her. "What do you mean?" "I mean that killing one human at a time is not working. They simply become more determined, more dangerous." Paused, letting her words sink in. "Perhaps we need to kill many humans at once. Perhaps we need to destroy one of their worlds." The chamber fell silent. What proposed was genocide. It was a war crime beyond anything the Council had done before. It would violate every treaty, every agreement, every principle that held galactic civilization together. But was desperate, and desperate beings made terrible decisions. "Do it," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Choose a target, destroy it. Let them see what happens when they challenge the masters of the galaxy." Smiled, it was not a pleasant expression. "As you wish, High Counselor." On Titan, in the depths of the refuge, Lisa Monroe had no idea what was coming. She was celebrating the success of their first counterattacks, allowing herself a moment of hope. That hope would not last long. New Virginia was a beautiful world. Green forests covered the northern continents. Golden wheat fields stretched across the southern plains. 3 million people called it home, building farms and cities and lives far from the crowded worlds of the inner colonies. Lisa Monroe had loved that world. Her small farm had been nestled in a valley between two gentle hills. She had planted apple trees there and watched them grow. She had imagined spending the rest of her life in that peaceful place. She never got the chance. The Council fleet arrived without warning. 50 warships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their weapons already charging. The Colonial Defense Force tried to respond, but they had only 3 small patrol vessels. They were destroyed in the first 30 seconds. Then the bombardment began. Plasma beams rained down from orbit, each one carrying enough energy to vaporize a city block. The first strikes hit the major population centers. The capital city of New Hope was gone in minutes, along with 200,000 people who never even knew what was happening. The smaller towns were next, then the farms, then the forests. In 12 minutes, New Virginia was dead. 3 million people reduced to ash and glass and memory. Lisa learned about the attack while aboard a transport ship heading for Earth. The news came through as a priority broadcast that interrupted all other communications. A young officer appeared on the screen, his face pale with shock. "This is an emergency announcement," he said, his voice shaking. "Colonial world New Virginia has been destroyed by orbital bombardment. Preliminary estimates suggest no survivors. Repeat, no survivors." The transport's common room fell silent. People stared at the screen, unable to process what they were hearing. Some began to cry. Others simply sat frozen, their minds refusing to accept the truth. Lisa did not cry. She did not move. She stood perfectly still, her hands clenched at her sides, and let the news wash over her. Her farm was gone. Her apple trees were gone. The peace she had hoped to find was gone. 3 million innocent people were gone. All because the Council could not accept losing a war. Daniel Cooper found her an hour later in the cargo hold. She was sitting on a crate in the darkness, staring at nothing. He had searched the entire ship looking for her. "Lisa," he said softly, approaching carefully. He had known her for 20 years. He had never seen her like this. She turned to face him, and Daniel took an involuntary step backward. He had served beside Lisa through the bloodiest battles of the war. He had seen her face impossible odds without showing any fear, but he had never seen her look like this. Her eyes were empty, cold, like windows into a void where nothing lived. "They burned it," she said. Her voice was calm, almost peaceful. "They burned everything, the fields, the houses, the children playing in the streets." "I know," Daniel replied quietly. 3 million people, Danny. They weren't soldiers. They weren't threats. They were families just trying to live their lives. She stood up slowly, her movements deliberate and controlled. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. It was harder now, sharper, like a blade being drawn from its sheath. "We are going to end this. Not the shadow purge, not the assassinations, all of it. We are going to destroy the Council." Daniel looked at her for a long moment. What she proposed was impossible. The Council controlled most of the galaxy. They had fleets that numbered in the millions. Even with the victories they had won in the war, humanity was still vastly outnumbered. But Daniel had learned long ago never to bet against Lisa Monroe. "How?" he asked simply. "We hit them where they live. Prime. The Council's secret capital. We take their leaders and we put them on trial for what they have done." The plan that emerged over the following weeks was the most ambitious military operation in human history. It required resources that humanity barely possessed and alliances that seemed impossible to achieve. but humans had always been good at doing the impossible. The first step was gathering intelligence. They needed to know everything about the Council's defenses, their command structure, and the exact location of their leadership. Brooks led a team into Council territory, posing as smugglers and criminals. They spent 3 months in the lawless regions of space, making contacts with beings who had information to sell. Slowly, they pieced together the puzzle of Prime. The second step was building alliances. Not all species in the Council supported the Shadow Purge. Some had voted against it in secret, terrified of what would happen if humanity discovered the truth. These species were approached carefully and offered protection in exchange for their help. There were a peaceful species of traders who had been bullied by the Council for centuries. They agreed to provide ships and supplies for the attack. The Hive was a collective intelligence that had been enslaved by the Council generations ago. They offered their vast computational abilities to coordinate the assault. Other species joined as well: the oppressed, the forgotten, the ones who had dreamed of freedom but never had the strength to fight for it alone. The third step was the attack itself. Lisa Monroe stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Rising Dawn. Around her, 2,000 ships hung in the darkness of space. Human vessels flew alongside alien craft, united by a common purpose. For centuries, Lisa said, her voice broadcast to every ship in the fleet, the galaxy has been ruled by fear. The Council built their empire by crushing anyone who dared to challenge them. They conquered, they enslaved, they destroyed. She paused, looking out at the stars that had witnessed so much suffering. When they came for humanity, they expected us to bow. They expected us to beg for mercy. Instead, we fought. We won. And when they could not accept their defeat, they came for us in the shadows. They killed our heroes. They burned our worlds. Her voice grew stronger, filling with a cold fire that made even hardened warriors shiver. Today, we show them what it truly means to face humanity. Today, we do not fight for survival. We fight for justice. We fight for the 3 million souls of New Virginia. We fight to ensure that no species ever again lives in fear of the Council's cruelty. She turned to her navigation officer. Set course for Prime. All ships, engage hyperspace drives on my mark. The fleet waited in perfect silence. 2,000 ships, ready to jump across the galaxy and face the greatest military power that had ever existed. Lisa Monroe took a deep breath. She thought of her farm on New Virginia. She thought of the apple trees she had planted. She thought of the peace she had wanted and the war she had been given instead. Then she gave the order. Mark! 2,000 ships vanished into hyperspace, leaving nothing behind but empty darkness. The final battle had begun. The Battle of Prime began at dawn. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their weapons already charging. The Council's defensive forces scrambled to respond, but they were caught completely off guard. In 12,000 years, no one had ever dared to attack the Council's secret capital directly. The first wave of human fighters swept through the orbital defense platforms like a storm of fire and steel. Plasma beams cut through shields that were supposed to be impenetrable. Missiles found gaps in armor that was supposed to be invincible. On the bridge of the Rising Dawn, Lisa Monroe directed the assault with calm precision. Around her, officers coordinated attacks with their alien allies, their voices steady despite the chaos of battle. Squadron, target the communication arrays, Lisa ordered. We need to cut off their distress signals. Hive, jam their sensors. I want them blind and deaf. The Council fleet fought back desperately. They outnumbered the attackers 3-1, and their ships were larger and more heavily armed. But they were fighting in confusion, their command structure shattered by the sudden attack. The humans fought with a fury that terrified their enemies. Every pilot, every gunner, every soldier remembered New Virginia. They remembered the 3 million people who had died because the Council could not accept defeat. They fought not for victory, but for vengeance. Daniel Cooper led the ground assault. His punch through the atmosphere of Prime, dodging anti-aircraft fire that filled the sky with deadly light. Behind him, 50 more carried human Marines who had trained for months for this moment. They landed in the central plaza of the Council's capital city. The buildings around them were ancient and beautiful, built from crystal and stone that had stood for. Daniel did not care about their beauty. He cared only about the creatures hiding inside. "Move out," he ordered. "The council chambers are 3 blocks north. We take them fast, we take them hard, and we do not stop until we have the leadership in chains." The Marines advanced through streets that had never known war. Council guards tried to stop them, but they were administrators and bureaucrats, not soldiers. They fell before the human assault like wheat before a scythe. High Counselor received word of the attack while eating breakfast in his private chambers. His aide burst through the door, pale and trembling. "High Counselor," the aide gasped, "the humans are here. They have broken through the orbital defenses. They are in the city." Dropped his cup, spilling dark liquid across the table. "Impossible. No one knows the location of Prime." "They know, High Counselor, and they are coming for you." Ran. He abandoned his dignity, his pride, everything he had built over centuries of political maneuvering. He ran through secret passages that only the highest members of the council knew existed. He would escape. He would rebuild. He would have his revenge. He found Daniel Cooper, waiting for him at the end of the passage. The human was covered in blood and dust, his armor scorched from plasma fire. He held a rifle in his hands and stood blocking the only exit. Behind him, more human soldiers waited with weapons raised. "Going somewhere?" Daniel asked calmly. Scales went completely white. He fell to his knees, all strength draining from his ancient body. "Please," he whispered, "we can negotiate. We can give you anything you want. Wealth, territory, power." Daniel walked forward until he stood directly over the cowering alien. He thought of the people who had died in the Shadow Purge. He thought of New Virginia burning. He thought of his friends who had been murdered simply for being human. "You have nothing we want," he said, "except justice." The trial of the Galactic Council was broadcast to every inhabited world in the galaxy. For 3 weeks, evidence was presented of their crimes. The assassinations, the secret votes, the burning of New Virginia, countless other atrocities stretching back thousands of years. Species who had suffered under council rule watched with tears in their eyes. They had never believed they would see this day. They had never imagined that the masters of the galaxy could be brought so low. Lisa Monroe delivered the final verdict. She stood before the assembled prisoners in a courtroom that had been built specifically for this moment. Her voice was broadcast across the stars. "The Galactic Council is hereby dissolved," she announced. "Its members are sentenced to exile on prison worlds, where they will spend the rest of their lives. Their assets will be distributed among the species they have oppressed." She paused, looking at and all the others who had voted to destroy humanity. They sat in chains, broken and defeated, unable to meet her eyes. "You thought you could break us," Lisa continued. "You thought that by hunting us in the shadows you would make us afraid. You thought that by burning our worlds you would make us surrender." Her voice hardened into steel. "You were wrong." She turned to face the cameras that carried her words to every corner of the galaxy. "Let this be a lesson to anyone who might follow in the Council's footsteps. Humanity does not forget. Humanity does not forgive. And humanity never stops fighting for what is right." In the years that followed, a new order emerged in the galaxy. The species that had been oppressed by the Council formed a federation based on equality and mutual respect. There were no masters and no slaves. There were only partners, working together to build a better future. Humanity, once dismissed as primitive newcomers, became leaders and protectors. They had earned that role not through conquest but through sacrifice. They had bled for the freedom of beings they had never met. Lisa Monroe retired again, this time to a small house in the mountains of Colorado on Earth. She planted apple trees in her backyard and watched them grow. On clear nights, she would sit on her porch and look up at the stars, thinking about everyone who had been lost along the way. Daniel Cooper visited her often. They would drink coffee together and talk about old times, about friends who had died, about battles they had fought, about the strange journey that had brought them from soldiers to saviors of the galaxy. "Do you think it was worth it?" Daniel asked her once. "All the fighting, all the death, all the pain." Lisa looked out at her apple trees, their branches heavy with fruit. Beyond them, the mountains stretched toward a sky that held more hope than she had ever imagined possible. "Ask me that question in 100 years," she said. "When the children of New Virginia's survivors are building homes on new worlds, when the species we freed are thriving, when no child in the galaxy goes to bed afraid of being conquered." She smiled, and for the first time in years the expression reached her eyes. "Then I will tell you it was worth it, every moment, every sacrifice, every life." Daniel nodded slowly. He understood. They had not fought for themselves. They had fought for everyone who would come after, for the generations who would never know what it meant to live in fear. The sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. Lisa Monroe watched it with quiet contentment. The wars were over. The hunters had become history, and humanity had found its place among the stars. Not as conquerors, not as victims, as protectors of all who could not protect themselves. And that, Lisa thought, was worth any price.